sticking on this theme of investiture and divestiture, as a proud Brit, I followed closely the coronation of King Charles III,
Uh,
and it was very interesting to see that quite lengthy ritualized process of investiture and divestiture, especially as they hid him from the crowd, and he took off much of his clothing, um, so that when the archbishop anointed him to become king, and then as he took off one set of princely robes and was clothed in kingly robes after being anointed, and that's when he was, then subsequently crowned. And yeah, it's just really, it's really interesting to see these kind of things. However, um, it brought up a lot of debate in our modern culture, because previously to that king, we had the longest reigning monarch, and
right.
who was older than much of the population, and so it really brought ritual to the forefront of conversation, at least in my country. And I just wonder what you think of how these kind of old rituals, are we losing touch in modern contemporary culture, of these, and people kind of saying, oh, it's a lot of stuffiness and pageantry, and there isn't really a need for it in today's world. I mean, what do you think of that, looking at it from a contemporary standpoint?
So part of what you're talking about is the role of ecclesiastical ritual, right? So the Church of England is, it's not Protestant. It's certainly not Catholic, but it's not Protestant, right? And by that I mean it's got what's called high ritual within ritual studies, within ecclesiastical ritual studies. There's
Right.
high ritual and low ritual churches. Church of England is towards the high end. Catholicism's high. Orthodoxy is super high, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then Baptists and not Episcopalians, though. That's American Church of Englandish, but we've done things to that. But a lot of that's low ritual, meaning they go, ritual isn't necessary, but here's the thing. Everybody engages in ritual. So even as the discussion is taking place as to whether or not there should be formal high ritual within the church ecclesiology, it's going to be replaced by something. Even church churches that are low ritual still engage in ritual, even if it's even if it's not salvific, even if it's on a lower kind of communal level, they still engage in ritual. A church that doesn't believe that baptism is salvific may still be baptized. And what they still will do is they'll meet every Sunday during a liminal time, because that's what Sundays are, right? Liminality, a Sabbath does it begin a week or does it end a week? Well, it's kind of both, right? Does it the culmination of a week or does it start a new one? Well, it's kind of an in-between state, isn't it?
Yes.
And when you look at the way God describes the Sabbath in the Bible, it's meant to be an in-between state, and a dedicatory space, which, since I'm just riffing on all of this stuff, temple dedications are liminal in nature, aren't they? Do they conclude an event or they begin an event? They're kind of both, right?
Mm-hmm.
So even churches that don't have high ritual still engage in low ritual. You're just not going to get away with it. To the people that say there's no place for ritual, I can guarantee you they engage in ritualized activities. It might be secular. It might be secular activities, but it's still activities. Do they have a set of ritual when they enter into the football stadium? Right? Do you wear the same clothing? Do you wear the same face makeup? Do whatever it is? Notice that these are ritualized type of behaviors to belong to the community. You're not getting away. Yeah. Humankind does ritual. And I don't particularly, I do care. Obviously, I care very much what type of ritual. But the truth is, I don't know anybody that doesn't do some type of ritual in some capacity. Whether it's secular or religious, you're a ritual. We're ritualized creatures. That's what we do. So I get the argument that says, well, is there a place for high ritual? I think there is. right? Being a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, I very much believe in high ritual. I've got a whole series of ordinances that are required to salvation. We fit within the category of a high ritual church, right? But I get the argument to those that say no when it comes to the Church of England and what's going on there. Having said that, you're still going to do ritual. And when it comes to royal ritual behavior of making a king or a queen, I don't know how you get away from ritual. You can't just say, hey, he's king. There's got to be some type of act that formalizes it. And to those acts, when you look at what happened with Prince Charles or Queen Elizabeth or any of them, part of this all the way goes back to the idea that kings and queens were divinely appointed by God. And therefore, they're going to do acts because that's the king. Now, you could correct me on this one, but the monarch, the sovereign of England, is also the leader of the Church of England. Am I correct in this? Even if you have an archbishop?
That's correct. It may not be the case for very long because Prince William isn't very keen on that idea.
Right.
For now.
Right.
For now,
and
it
now,
is.
Now, that's just a vestige. It's a leftover. But the idea behind that, it goes way back. We're talking centuries, millennia, of where the idea is that the king or queen, the monarch, is an ecclesiastical figure as well as a political figure. That's when church and state were combined. Now, it's only been in the last few centuries that we've really peeled those apart, right? And so we've got this ritualized function of the creation of a monarch in King Charles. But that's where all of a sudden those vestiges come back into play. But that's because it was believed that the monarch was chosen by God, that this was God's chosen vessel on earth to represent his interests. So the monarch was both a political figure and an ecclesiastical figure. And what that meant is the monarch had to not only receive all the accoutrements of the political power, but had to receive all the accoutrements for the ecclesiastical power. Now, who's the leader of an ecclesiastical community? A priest. Thus, the king has to go through priestly acts to become the monarch. Does that make sense? It's not just a political figure. It's a religious figure. And that means they're going to have to go through the process of how you would make a priest. Now, of course, it's Europe, and so they're influenced by the Bible more than anything else. Mm-hmm. So if you look at that and go back to Exodus, what's the procedure by which you make a priest? They get washed, they get anointed, they get clothed, right? And then they get a name. So one of the things you left out in your description of Charles, and I can guarantee you it happened. I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but I can guarantee it happened because I know it happened in past English royal procedures. They all got washed. They got washed by the king, by the Archbishop of is it Canterbury?
Canterbury. Yeah,
it's Canterbury. The Archbishop washed them. Then they were anointed, and that oil is only used for the anointing of a monarch or an archbishop. So it's a special oil. You can find the recipe online. I guarantee you someone's got the recipe online of the special anointing oil for the king. So you're anointed with that oil, which is straight out of Exodus. There's this particular recipe for the anointing of priests and the anointing of the temple, the tabernacle for that matter. And it says, if anybody else uses this oil for anything other than the anointing of priests of the tabernacle, they will forfeit their life. So it's kind of a big deal.
Wow.
The third one was they're then clothed. And that's where we started the conversation, right? The priest is clothed with the special sacerdotal robes and everything. Aaron and everyone else is. And this doesn't so much show up in Exodus, though you are now told through this procedure, Aaron is set apart. He's different. He doesn't engage with the rest of Israel the same way. He's now in a set apart state. Truthfully, I think it's liminal by virtue of the type of clothing that he wears, but we can talk about that in a second. And therefore can facilitate movement between the divine and mortal. But he gets a name. King Charles got a new name when he became king. I don't know what it is, But if you went through his names, because he's got all those different names to it, right? There'll be a
Yeah.
new name added. It's his regnal name. His new name is King. He's still Charles. That's the
Right.
part of his name that you know. But there will be a new addition to that name, reflective of him becoming king. He will have been washed, anointed, clothed, and given a new name.
Wow. I've just Googled, did King Charles get a new, to see if it came up. But yeah, it does. It takes their name and he becomes King Charles III, or Carolus Rex, as they would put it into Latin, I think.
Yeah.
And you give up the kind of original surname and stuff, and just
Yeah, there's a change. And I think in his big, huge, long one, I think he actually takes on just like a not that he's a monk, but if you joined a religious order, you would take on yourself a new name, right?
that's really interesting. Well, I'm
And that's
thinking of Kate Middleton when she became the Princess of Wales. You're not supposed to call her name isn't Kate Middleton anymore. It's Catherine, Princess of Wales.
There you go, right? And now
Nerdy
that's
monarch stuff, but it's interesting.
it is, because then you can think of it in terms of the Old Testament. When Solomon becomes king, he seemed to have had his name changed there. Abraham receives a new name, right?
Yeah, Jacob to Israel, right?
Yeah,
Would that count as...
you get these names. So
Gosh.
there you go. I'm looking it up now too. I just wanted to see
Yeah.
what's his regnal name. That's what you have to look up. Regnal name is the ruling name used by the monarch. It can be a first name or his.
Right. So he could have changed his first name and
Yeah.
asked for a new one, but he kept it. But it's taken on a new meaning and with the king.
Yeah. In fact, as I'm reading this thing from Independent, I don't know if that's a good place or not, but it looks like prior to this, there was speculation that Charles may have elected out of being called King Charles III and could have chosen one of his middle names, Philip, Arthur, or George instead.
Right. That is really interesting.
And part of the reason why is because prior there had been two King Charleses. King Charles I was best known for being beheaded and overthrown by Oliver Cromwell.
Absolutely. Yeah. Good old... I was at Parliament last week and saw the exact place where he was beheaded. There we are.
There you go.